So, to the degree I do.
Between you and I.
Good morning, and welcome to the Greenville Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Mary D. Harper. I've been a member of this congregation, I just figured it out, for 48 years. And I've served in various capacities over the years. Currently, I'm co-chair of fundraising, Come to the Talent Show Saturday night. I serve on the Pastoral Care Committee, I sing in the choir, and I'm the former treasurer of the UU World of Children. Probably something else, but I can't think of it. Whether you have been with us on Sundays for a long time or are visiting us for the first time today, we welcome you to our service. This congregation is a theologically diverse religious community with participation open to all who agree to live into our principles, missions, and values. We are a welcoming congregation to people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, races, ethnicities, and abilities. And we unconditionally welcome you as your full, authentic self to our community of caring and commitment to grow as spiritual and moral beings. Our congregational mission is to strengthen our connections to one another and our planet by enlivening minds and spirits, building community through liberating love, and advocating fiercely for justice. It is a custom in this congregation to acknowledge visitors and newcomers. If this is your first time here or you're newish, would you mind raising your hand so that we can acknowledge you? Right. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. All are invited to join us for coffee after the service. New and newer folks are invited to grab a green mug located just inside the door of the fellowship hall so we can easily spot you and speak to you during coffee hour. You are also welcome to fill out one of the green cards that can be found in the backs of the pews so that we can keep in touch with you. Simply drop the card in the offering basket or in the box at the welcome table in the foyer. Please know that whatever your religious history, whatever your personal theology, all people of goodwill are welcome here. Your presence makes us better. Your presence makes us whole. Our service will now begin.
Good morning. For our trellis lighting today, I would like to share with you part of our new covenant, which describes the commitments we in our congregation make to each other. We practice radical inclusion and celebrate the diverse identities in our community, recognizing that each of us brings unique gifts, perspectives that contribute to our collective growth and understanding.
Good morning, Goof. I'm the Reverend Chris Hockman. Thank you for being here and making this dreary day a little less dreary. Our call to worship this morning is from the Reverend Rebecca Savage. We gather together today with sacred intention to declare that justice is our prayer. We affirm in covenant with the beloved community that is possible. Not here, not quite yet. The seeds have been planted time and again, and we remember all those who went before us that made beloved community in our time a dream that could be realized. Justice is our prayer. May our time together continue to water the budding trees of our diverse interdependence. May our time together give air and nourishment to the parts of our collective spirits that need to grow and thrive in order to embrace equity as a known way of being. Justice is our prayer. We affirm in covenant with the beloved community that is possible. May it be so. Come, let us worship together. Please rise and body our spirit for hymn number 168 in the gray hymnal, One More Step. And this is a perky one, so I want to see a little perky, okay?
Good morning. I'm David Funderburg. I'm the Director of Religious Education here at Goof. And before our story today, I want to let parents know that we'll have one spirit play class today from kindergarten to third grade, so they'll all be in the room at the end of the hall on the right. So for our story, I will welcome any children or youth or anyone of any age who wants to hear the story up close to come sit on the floor at the base of the steps or in the front pews. I wonder if you have ever done something that you realized later was wrong or mean or has that ever happened to you and you realized later that you did the wrong thing? Has it ever happened that you did that and you realized it was too late to make it right? And when that happens, it's a missed opportunity. Well, our book today is called Each Kindness by Jacqueline Woodson, illustrated by E.B. Lewis, and it's about that sort of missed opportunity. That winter, snow fell on everything, turning the world a brilliant white. One morning, as we settled into our seats, the classroom door opened, and the principal came in. She had a girl with her, and she said to us, "This is Maya." Maya looked down at the floor. I think I heard her whisper, "Hello." We all stared at her. Her coat was open, and the clothes beneath it looked old and ragged. Her shoes were spring shoes, not meant for the snow. The strap on one of them had broken. Our teacher, Miss Albert, said, "Say good morning to our new student," but most of us were silent. The only empty seat was next to me. That's where our teacher put Maya. And on that first day, Maya turned to me and smiled, but I didn't smile back. I moved my chair, myself and my books, a little further away from her. When she looked my way, I turned to the window and stared out at the snow. And every day after that, when Maya came into the classroom, I looked away and didn't smile back. My best friends that year were Kendra and Sophie. At lunchtime, we walked around the schoolyard, our fingers laced together, whispering secrets into each other's ears. One day, while we were near the slide, Maya came over to us. She held open her hand to show us the shiny jacks and tiny red ball she'd gotten for her birthday. "It's a high bouncer," she said, but none of us wanted to play. So Maya played a game against herself. That afternoon, when we got back into the classroom, Maya whispered to me, "Bet you can't guess who the new Jacks champion of the world is." Behind me, Andrew whispered, "Chloe's got a new friend. Chloe's got a new friend." "She's not my friend," I whispered back. The weeks passed. Every day we whispered about Maya, laughing at her clothes, her shoes, her strange food she brought for lunch. Some days, Maya held out her hand to show us what she had brought to school. A deck of cards, pickup sticks, a small tattered doll. Whenever she asked to play, we said no. The days grew warmer and warmer. The pond thawed. Grass began growing where snow had once been. One day, Maya came to school wearing a pretty dress and fancy shoes, but the shoes and the dress looked like they'd belonged to another girl before Maya. "I have a new name for her," Kendra whispered. "Never knew. Everything she has came from a second-hand store." We all laughed. Maya stood by the fence. She was holding a jump rope, but did not come over to us to ask if we wanted to play. After a while, she folded it double, rolled the ends around each hand, and started jumping. She jumped around the whole schoolyard without stopping. She didn't look up once, just jumped, jumped, jumped. Now I'm curious, before I turn the page, how do you think Maya feels about the way the other kids treat her? What do you think?
I think she feels lonely, so she's just ignoring them, just like
She feels lonely, so she's just ignoring them like they did to her. What do you think?
Insecure.
She may feel insecure. The next day, Maya's seat was empty. In class that morning, we were talking about kindness. Miss Albert had brought a big bowl into the class and filled it with water. We all gathered round her. We gathered round her desk and watched her drop a small stone into it. Tiny waves rippled out away from the stone. "This is what kindness does," Miss Albert said. "Each little thing we do goes out like a ripple into the world." Then Miss Albert let us each drop the stone in as we told her what kind of things we had done. Joseph had held the door for his grandmother. Kendra helped change her baby brother's diaper. Even mean old Andrew had done something. "I carried teacher's books up the stairs," he said. And Miss Albert said it was true. I stood there holding Miss Albert's rock in my hand, silent. "Even small things count," Miss Albert said gently. But I couldn't think of anything and passed the stone on. Maya didn't come to school the next day or the day after that. Each morning I walked to school slowly, hoping this would be the day Maya returned and she'd look at me and smile. I promised myself this would be the day I smiled back. "Each kindness," Miss Alberts had said, "makes the world a little bit better." Why do you think she's so excited to see Maya again?
Because she had done something wrong and wants to fix it.
Because she did something wrong and she wants to fix it?
Might be a little bit late today, so she still has
But Maya's seat remained empty. And one day, Miss Albert announced to the class that Maya wouldn't be coming back. Her family had moved away. Miss Albert said. Then she told us to take out our notebooks. It was time for spelling. That afternoon, I walked home alone. When I reached the pond, my throat filled with all the things I wish I would have said to Maya, each kindness I had never shown. I threw small stones into it, over and over, watching the way the water rippled out and away, like each kindness, done and not done, like every girl somewhere holding a small gift out to someone, and that someone turning away from it. I watched the water ripple as the sun set through the maples, and the chance of a kindness with Maya becoming more and more forever gone. Now that, you might think, is a pretty sad ending. But I want to ask you, what could the main character do if they never get a chance to talk to Maya again? What could they learn from that experience so that they could actually turn that experience into a positive thing? What do you think?
If she hadn't then she could say
Okay, so she could learn to say nice things in the future? Any other ideas?
he could have he could like encourage and smile back in the things instead of looking at you rude.
So she can learn to do things differently the next time she meets someone new? Thank you for listening. We're going to go to class now, and I ask you please to let me go first, and you can follow quietly behind me down the center aisle.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather there to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will support the self-supporting fellowship and its many ministries. The gifts of the congregation will be most grateful received. It is custom in this fellowship to share the joys and sorrows that shape our lives, honoring each one with the lighting of a candle. We recognize that life is not always easy and that we will all have moments of celebration and struggle. We believe that sharing these experiences with one another, we can experience with support and uplift with each other as we navigate through the significant events of our lives. We will light a candle for each joy and sorrow now. A candle of concern for my brother-in-law, Bob. Please keep him and my sister, Carol, in your thoughts and prayers as they await news. And that is from Laura Christianberry. I am wearing purple today to remember Furman football player Bryce Stanfield, who died during a workout this past week. That's from Steve Crompton. I just want to thank each and every Goof member and staff and volunteer. You have welcomed Tristan and I, helped us feel like we are home. That's from Alicia Ramirez Sanders. A shout out of appreciation for John Greer's wonderful music and Marion Greer's hosting at the Tuesday night event at Goof. A delightful event. And that was from Linda Morton and Blooms. We will light a final candle representing all the joys and sorrows present in our hearts that remain unspoken. We will now observe a brief moment of silence before the words of meditation.
Our words for meditation are from Rebecca Savage. Spirit of life, eternal mystery that holds us close, receive the meditations of our hearts this day. We come together in this quiet moment to unify our hearts again towards the clarion call of our time. May justice and equity guide us to greater connection, a greater truth. Our part is just as great, to approach dismantling systems of oppression within us in order for us all to be free. To know that when I cherish and tend to the divine spark within me, when I know in my bones that I am worthy of love and whole just as I am, that there is greater potential for mutual understanding and care. Love is not scarce. Our ability to extend compassion and grace can be. I place my hand over my heart and know I can feel the spirit of life within me. The spirit of life is divine within us. The spirit of life is here. This is the beginning of justice and equity when we go within to be of service in our communities and our world. May it be so. Amen. Today, I'll be sharing with you a story from our Universalist history, particularly our Black Universalist history. This story is about the Universalist missions in Virginia and will be told through the lens of 4 amazing individual Universalists. The source material for this sermon is a book edited by the retired UU minister Mark Morrison Reed. And the book is called Darkening the Doorways, Black Trailblazers and Missed Opportunities in Unitarian Universalism. And I encourage you to check it out. I will put a link to it on our Facebook group because I cannot tell you all of the marvelous details and sacrifices about these individuals in 20 minutes. So the story of the Virginia mission begins with the birth of a man named Joseph Jordan. His last name was spelled Jordan, but it was pronounced Jordan. He was a free man born in 1842 near Norfolk, Virginia. He was a carpenter who turned to building homes for rental income. Literate, skilled, and a property owner, Jordan was among the elite of the Black community. Jordan was also religious. By 1880, when he was 38, he had become an ordained Baptist minister. And this is where I'm going to stop and refer to the photos. We do not have an existing photo of Joseph Jordan, so we have the three other individuals I will be talking about and refer to as they come up. But Joseph Jordan was an ordained Baptist minister, and a few years into his ministry, something seems to happen over and over again happened. Someone gave him a book about Universalism. It was a book by the Universalist minister Thomas Whittemore. The book made an immediate and powerful impression on Jordan. He read that Universalism was not a religion for the bigoted, but for those who could accept that God's love extends equally to all, the powerless and the powerful, the oppressed and their oppressors. And he was hooked. So no longer feeling able to preach the Baptist faith, Jordan went to Philadelphia in 1886 to meet Edwin Sweetster, the minister of the Universalist church there. And Jordan stayed there for 7 months, and he studied and worshiped under this Universalist minister. So returning to Norfolk, he began to preach the Universalist faith. He rented a room to serve as a chapel, which was soon packed with worshipers. He constructed his own pulpit. He and his congregation of 20 families formally organized themselves as a Universalist mission in 1887. It was not long before parents came to him and the mission, pleading that Jordan establish a day school for their children, which was sorely needed because schools for Black children at the time were few and far between. So Jordan obliged and started a school. In 1889, he was ordained, becoming Universalism's first African-American minister. He hoped that the Universalist faith would spread ever more widely in the Black communities of the South. The denominational governing body quickly admitted his church into fellowship as the first Universalist church of Norfolk. By 1900, the day school served 50 pupils and had 3 teachers. Schools for Black children continued to be in great demand, so there was demand to grow. Universalism as a faith, however, it was pretty controversial and debated in the local Black press. The Norfolk Universalist Church seemed a challenge to the established Black churches, and as a national institution, Universalism was still primarily white and segregationist. Regular subsidies by the Universalist denomination kept the church open and the day school going. Nevertheless, while the day school remained strong, the congregation never really grew and thrived. But the mission continued under Jordan's leadership until his death in 1901 at the age of 58 of an unknown disease. The next leader of the Virginia mission was Thomas E. Wise. He is the first picture on the left. He was the son of illiterate parents, born near Norfolk in 1868. As a child, he worked in the fields and attended school, and he eventually attended Howard University in Washington, D.C. His education led him to doubt his traditional faith, to explore Universalism, and he learned of the work of Joseph Jordan in Norfolk. So in the late 1880s, Wise joined Jordan as a teacher and associate in the Norfolk Church. A tireless organizer, he soon became the academic principal of the school. In 1894, prominent Black citizens of Suffolk, Virginia, which was 20 miles southwest of Norfolk, called upon Wise to establish a school there. So he went to Suffolk, he rented a hall, and organized a Universalist mission and church school in Suffolk on the weekends, and he continued to serve the Norfolk school during the work week. And of course, this is before automobiles. The Suffolk mission profited from Wise's numerous contacts in the area, and it even benefited from an attack on Universalism by more traditional Suffolk area Black ministers. This was done in the Black press, and Wise responded with a spirited defense of Universalism in the press, which brought new defectors into the fold of the Universalist mission. So he was a pretty convincing guy. He was ordained a Universalist minister in 1895, making him this Universalism's second African-American minister, with 2 days of festivities in Norfolk and lots of visiting dignitaries from the Universalist denomination. So the Universalist governing body, they were really motivated by having a second black minister and a second mission in the South, and they had the hopeful vision of expansion. So they solicited funds for a church and a school building in Suffolk, and it was backed by the support of the famous circuit-riding Universalist missionary named Quillen Shin. They even have a song about him in the UU church camp up in Ferry Beach in Maine, which involves banging loudly on tables. Anyway, enough money was raised by the Universalists to build a 2-story mission building, and much of the labor and some of the materials were donated by local craftspeople. It was dedicated as St. Paul's Universalist Mission in December 1897. But because Wise was so heavily engaged in the Norfolk school, in 1898 he had to find more teachers for the Suffolk mission, his wife being one of them. The Suffolk Day School started with 40 pupils, but in 3 years, the average attendance was 76, with 275 students on the rolls. This discrepancy is because the children still needed to work in the fields and mills to help sustain their families, so their attendance fluctuated with the seasons. Church attendance was never particularly high in Suffolk, and the mission church remained dependent on the school pretty much to exist. The community grew to accept the Universalist faith and the school, and Wise became a well-known and respected community leader in Suffolk. And after the death of Joseph Jordan in 1901, Wise acted as the administrator and pastor for both of the missions in Norfolk and Suffolk. He preached to each congregation on alternate Sundays, promising a great future for both. Wise also created a third mission in a place called Ocean View, which was 8 miles north of Norfolk. Black residents there, employed by the white seaside resort, had no access to education at the time. But eventually, the Universalist headquarters began to notice that Wise was spreading himself too thin, and that 2 of the 3 missions were failing. Now, did they send people in to help him? No. Did they send money so he could hire more staff to cover all of the mission sites? No, they didn't. Instead, the Universalists concluded that only the Suffolk mission, the largest and most successful, would stay open. The Universalist higher-ups also dictated that the Suffolk mission begin to focus on industrial training for students rather than traditional academics. And the denomination also began to question whether Wise was really preaching universalism, some calling his doctrinal foundation shaky. So Wise did not want to see any of these missions go away. This was his hard work and sacrifice. And he was upset that academic education would not be available at the mission schools for the mission school's most talented students. So in 1904, only 3 years after the death of Joseph Jordan, Wise left the mission and he left Universalism. He was overworked and at odds with the denomination. He joined the African Methodist Episcopal Church and took 8 members of the Norfolk Church with him. From there, he eventually moved to Alexandria, Virginia, and ended his life as a grocer. Ministry was not a very stable job option back then. The next leader of the missions, the photo in the man in the middle there, confusingly enough, has the same name as the original founder. He was Joseph F. Jordan, this time spelled Jordan and pronounced Jordan. Joseph F. Jordan, no relation to the founder, Joseph Jordan. I know. Joseph Jordan, he was born into slavery in 1863 in North Carolina. At the age of 25, he was ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal Church and served a church in Wilson, North Carolina with distinction. In 1890, he received a Doctor of Divinity degree from Barrett's College. And sometime after that, fatefully, the same thing happened. Someone sent him a book on Universalism. He and his wife, Mary, devoured it. Yet, Joseph later served a Presbyterian congregation in Lewisburg, North Carolina, while he and his wife also taught school to make ends meet. He then gave up ministry for a while, and around 1900 moved his family to Durham, where he concentrated on reading law, passed the bar exam, and established a legal practice. This guy was no slacker. But one day, he heard that the famous Universalist missionary and supporter of the Virginia missions, Quillen Shin, was going to preach at Durham Courthouse. Jordan and his wife went to hear the preaching of Quillen Shin, and a few minutes in, he leaned over to his wife. Jordan whispered, "This is what I am." And his wife replied, "That makes two of us." The conversion had taken place. In 1903, Jordan was accepted as a Universalist minister, and for fear of having any shaky theological foundation, he was sent to a Universalist seminary to study for a year. And of course, after that year, where did he end up? He came to the Virginia missions, only to arrive 1 week after Thomas Wise quit. So things were in disarray when he got there, and he made an attempt to save the missions in Norfolk and Ocean View, but eventually he was forced to simply focus his attention on the more sustainable mission in Suffolk, where the school was now known as the Suffolk Normal Training School. Jordan had dreams of expanding the school for all grades and even to start a seminary training for future Black Universalist ministers. He asked the denomination for $6,000 to make this happen. That was a lot of money back then, granted, but the dream went unfunded. Yet at the same time, the Universalists were spending larger amounts of money annually to support missions in Japan. That money amounted, over 10 years or so, amounted to $275,000 in cumulative support for Japan in roughly a decade. So in 1911, Jordan took matters into his own hands and went on a fundraising tour of the Northeast Universalist churches, but still only managed to collect enough just to add an addition onto the existing building, not the great dream. But because the big expansion was not going to happen. But the smaller expansion allowed the school to begin to serve 300 students. And by this time, both of Jordan's daughters were serving as full-time teachers, unpaid. In 1916, Jordan worked with a local employer. If you know anything about Southside Virginia, it's peanut country. So the big local employer was Planters Nuts. He worked them to hire his school graduates, and the school also provided around-the-clock childcare for folks working at the plant. By this time, Jordan was a really big presence in the community, and he still had to work various jobs to support his family. Insurance. I think he was a youth probation officer kind of thing. He was definitely not underworked. And along with the school, a small Universalist congregation still existed of about 30 people, within the building, the school, that was primarily the schools. There was still some support coming from the denomination. But after years of declining health, Jordan died in 1929 at the age of 66, still a Universalist. Upon his death, one of his friends wrote about him, "He found Suffolk a wilderness of ignorance and crudeness. He leaves it a garden of intelligence and culture." The next and last leader of the Suffolk mission, and the last of our photos, is Annie Willis. That is Annie Jordan Willis, Joseph F. Jordan's daughter, who took over the mission after her father's death. Early in her tenure, the Universalist congregation in Suffolk faded away because they didn't have a minister, primarily. But the school continued to thrive. And after more than a decade of running the school, the woman who is lovingly known as Miss Annie was forced by the Universalist denomination to make a big pivot. Educational opportunities for Black children were increasing through the public school system, and the Universalist Church organization was also facing some financial belt tightening. So Miss Annie was told, not asked, that her school should be repurposed as the Jordan Neighborhood House and provide social services rather than education. Yet Miss Annie rolled with the changes, with the Jordan Neighborhood House now offering prenatal and well baby clinics, children's clubs, a parents' league, home visitations, and counseling. And in 1949, the Neighborhood House was handed off to the Universalist Service Committee, their social justice wing. And the Association of Universalist Women really took interest in this project and actually managed to shift some of the focus back on education with the operation of a Head Start program and having preschool and kindergarten. And at the time, the director of the Universalist Service Committee was really supportive and understood the importance of the mission of the neighborhood house. And he visited often from Boston, developed a close relationship with Annie Willis. Yet, after the merger with the Unitarians, the neighborhood house was not seen as a priority, and that original director was basically overruled, much to his dismay. And the UUA officially ended its support of the Suffolk mission in 1969. The organization still managed to continue without UU support until Annie's retirement in 1974. Its kindergarten program survived and moved to another location where it survived until 1984. And Annie Willis died a few years after her retirement in 1997 at the age of 84. So Universalism may have forgotten Annie Willis, but she and her preschool and kindergarten programs are still fondly remembered throughout Eastern Virginia. You're usually about 2 degrees of separation from knowing someone who went to the school or someone in their family went to the school and knew about Annie Willis. Like her father had been, Annie Willis was an icon of Suffolk, Virginia, and her impact on the community has still not been forgotten. So, in telling this story, I can't help but wonder how it may have been different if the Universalists had gone all in on the Virginia missions, in people and in resources. Now, the Universalists did offer some support, and particular individual Universalists were definitely all in. But from the larger denomination, there was a reluctance, some half-heartedness, and a lack of true commitment to make it work and thrive. In his analysis, Mark Morrison Reed says, not too surprisingly, that racial prejudice and paternalism were a factor in the reluctance of the Universalists to fully commit to the Virginia missions. The substantial difference in the subsidies given to the Suffolk mission as opposed to the $250,000 given to missions in Japan suggests this, as does the dispute with Thomas Wise over the mission school's direction, academic or technical. Plus, there were Universalist officials who openly opposed the missions and actively undermined their funding and support. Now, Mark Morrison Reed shares other reasons that Universalism as a religious option for African Americans really never caught fire at the time. Theologically, Universalism did not address the conundrum of Black suffering, which severely limited its appeal. It was hard to convince someone born into slavery that there was no hell for slave owners, that their own unearned suffering did not serve the greater purpose of redemption, a glorious afterlife. In many ways, the theology was just not a good fit with the lived experience of Black people of the time. Despite all of this, this is still a story of missed opportunity, one that has repeated itself over the centuries. How Unitarians or Universalists, or how Unitarian Universalists who did not fit the Euro-American paradigm have gone unsupported and overlooked. It's another story of self-defeating, conflicted white people missing the mark, failing to commit and prioritize, and the consequences of their actions or non-actions were always painful, as were the consequences. A religion that promises equality and salvation for all, yet fails to live up to the promise in its practice. So all of this brings to mind a quote from George Santayana. I'm sure you've all heard it. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But I'm going to change it up a little bit. How about those who cannot remember the past and do not understand their critical role in the present cannot create a better future? That makes sense? All right. Well, that's my spin on it anyway. Blessed be and amen. All right, we're going to sing again. Please rise in body or spirit to sing 1017 in the Teal hymnal, Building a New Way.
Please join me in saying the words in the order of service as we extinguish this chalice again. We extinguish this flame, but not in the light of truth, the warmth of the commitment or the commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Before our very brief closing words, I have a couple of announcements. Don't forget, it's picture day in the fellowship hall after service. All are invited to get your directory photo taken or retaken. We need current photos from almost everyone. If your directory photo is more than 2 years old, this means you. Another announcement, our pledge drive kickoff and party is being pushed back 1 week to March 23rd after service. Free food and drink for all, and pledge materials will be available for pickup then. Oh, February 23rd, sorry. No, it's not in March, it is in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now. The 25th? 2 weeks from today. Okay, this is why I should not ever have to do announcements. Our closing words today are from Jabari S. Jones. May we remember the wounds of the past that bleed into the present, so that we may heal and grow into the future together, whole and wise. May we remember and be free at last. Just a reminder that you may exit after me as the postlude begins, or stay here quietly and bask in the music. Dear ones, go in peace, return in love, and blessed be.